Hey guys, during our conversation a few months back, I was talking about the big lifts I do in here with all my athletes to get them stronger and better prepared for participating in their sports. Not only my athletes, but everyone I work with. I usually do these main lifts, the big lifts, the deadlift, the squat, and the bench press. So the other videos, I went over the deadlift and bench press. Right here, we're gonna go over the squat, the barbell squat, specifically the low bar back squat. So the reason for getting the bar on our back, whether you're doing a low bar or a high bar back squat, is to be a little bit more glute ham specific. The low bar back squat, which we'll go over here in a second, is really going to target your glutes and hamstrings. Of course, you're still using your quads, but not as much as if you're keeping your chest vertical when squatting. So we want to get a little bit of anterior tilt when you're squatting, so and go forward a little bit to get in those glutes and hamstrings a little bit. We'll switch up the application if we want to get more into the quads. So if I want to get more into the quads, I'm going to keep my chest more upright. So I do a front squat or a goblet squat. However, I rarely use those just because we are pretty quad dominant with a lot of stuff we do, so we need to target those hams and glutes. So the first thing with your squat, with the barbell squat, number one rule, face the rack when you pull the bar off the rack. So a lot of times you'll see people come up to it like this and walk away from the rack. Don't do that, because when you want to get the bar back to the rack, you want your client or yourself to be looking at where you're going instead of falling back into it. So facing the rack when you get underneath that bar. All right, your setup. So like I said, we're doing a low bar back squat. So that's going to be positioned low on your shoulders. Let me grab a dowel here to show you. So again, the bar is going to be positioned low on your shoulders. So down there, opposed to up here. Again, this is just going to help maintain that anterior tilt, help create a little bit more tension in your shoulders and a little bit more core support. All right, so that's the other thing with your upper body setup. You want to get your hands really tight. So not out here being lazy. Really tight, pulling those elbows down into your lats to create more tension in your shoulders and your upper body, and also to create a shelf up here for that bar to rest on. And then the last thing with your upper body, your thumb setup. So right now you see my thumbs are wrapped around the bar. I want you to get your thumbs on the same side as your fingers, and the reason for that is so you can take away any flexion, or excuse me, any extension in your wrist. Cock those wrists so you're in a straight line, and pulling that bar back down into your shoulders are going to create more tension. All right, so that's the upper body setup. Lower body, so your squat stance, you're going to be slightly outside, shoulder width apart, and your toes angled anywhere from 20 to 30 degrees out. The reason for that is to help your knees track out instead of buckling in. So the number one thing you don't want to happen with your lower body or a client's lower body is to let those knees buckle in. So turn those toes out to help force them to track outwards. You don't actively want to push out as you go down, but feeling as if the force is on the outside of your knees so they don't buckle in. So that's why we have the 30 or so degrees on your toes, feet just outside shoulder width apart. One thing that could help keep your feet, also the balance needs to be centered on your feet. One thing that could help, if your client feels like they're falling too far forward or there's too much compression in their heels, going barefoot and replacing their shoe, that raised heel on their shoe, with a thin, like 10-pound plate, something that's about that thin, to get their heel raised a little bit, but to have a hard surface so their shoe's not compressing and creating some instability as they're squatting. All right, so with that being said, let's get underneath the bar, and then I'll show you the side angle. So again, that setup, looking towards the rack, my thumbs are on the same side. I'm gonna cock my wrist forward so they're in a straight line. That bar is low against my shoulder, so as I stand up, I'm pulling that bar down into my shoulders. So looking at my feet, I'm about 30 degrees turned out. Feet just outside shoulder width apart. So before I go down, I'm going to pull that bar down into my shoulders, and the depth here at the bottom is really important. So I'm going to get my hips below my knees. Alright, so that's the back angle. We'll move it over to the side, show you guys the side angle. Then we'll talk about the one last thing I want to talk about here is breathing. So the breath is important here. We're set up there. All right, again, everything's the same. This angle, I want you guys to see the depth. So important here, getting those hips below the knees. The reason for that, so I'll explain after the squat here, so everything's staying the same at my stance, feet outside shoulder width apart, toes 30 degrees out, bars low on my shoulders, wrists are straight. I get nice and deep, my hips are below my knees, and come on out from there. Show you guys one more here, nice and deep, hips below the knees, don't let those knees buckle in, come on out from there. All right, and again, here's why you're facing the rack, so you can see where you're going. All right, one other big thing, so if you didn't mention, is your breathing. Before you start moving, you take a big deep breath, fill your stomach with air. The reason for that is to create a pocket in your torso to protect your lower back and help you keep tight, help you keep that tension. That's just gonna protect your lower back, help you move a little bit of heavier weight. But you're gonna take a big deep breath in at the top, hold it all the way down, all the way up, exhale up top. All right, and then one last thing to mention here, which I glazed over, did not. Sorry about that, backtracking a minute here. Once you get that bar set up, the reason we're on that low bar back squat, aside from all that, creating that tension like I talked about earlier, is to maintain a little bit of anterior tilt. See how my chest is angled forward? That way we can get into our hamstrings and glutes a little bit more opposed to staying upright. So you're maintaining that anterior tilt, sticking that butt out, and then the bar is going to stay right over your center of gravity, right over the middle of your foot as you're squatting. So hips are low, maintain that anterior tilt. As I come up, so that chest is angled forward, hold that position. The one other thing was what I'm